Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. For this video, it's going to be a bit different. This time we're going to talk about the 10 must-know tips in writing SAP Functional Specification documents. First and foremost, I want you guys to think of yourself as an SAP fresher, being given a blank functional specification template. Sure, you may find a few keywords and or sentences here and there in the template, and the question would be, that should be enough, right? Well, in my case, my response to that would be, no, it is not enough. So back when I was an SAP fresher, I had a lot of things on my mind. I have encountered that scenario. Now, don't get me wrong. The template had a lot of keywords and sentences. Nothing wrong with that. At the time, my concerns as a fresher were more of the following. How do I start? Where do I begin exactly? So those were my concerns. And the best part would be, can I just have a completed functional specifications document? I just want to see an example and get an idea. So I'm sure some of you may be able to relate to that part. Basically, a lot of thoughts and questions pop up as a beginner, and it would be honestly great to have a colleague or a mentor assist you with these concerns, maybe even a formal training. And you know what? That is the ideal scenario, but in some cases, that may not necessarily be readily available for every SAP fresher. So sometimes you may need something more. May it be a bit more guidance, a different perspective. At least in my case, I definitely needed something more. So we will talk about the 10 must-know tips in writing SAP Functional Specification documents. But before anything, I do want to introduce something quite exciting for me, which is a milestone. I'm introducing the digital kit and course rolled into one for SAP consultants and freshers. So this mini course basically focuses on creating functional specifications. You can expect me to share my experiences. So if you're interested, I will leave the link in the description box below. Just so you guys have something to look forward to, I want to share that you can take advantage of the learning materials because there will be 3 downloadable resources. That would be a comprehensive functional specification template, a populated functional specification document, and the third one would be the functional specifications checklist. So there are 2 versions that you can download. First is the Excel file and the second one is in Google Forms format. This is of course intended to provide guidance, and you will expect me to share some use case scenarios on how to create functional specifications and utilize the materials that you will download. So I do want to share that these are personal functional specifications guide and checklists. These are my personal templates, and I have crafted them following the different projects, changes, roles that I have experienced over the years. So that being said, you can expect the following. So it's going to be based on my experiences. We're talking about SAP to SAP, even non-SAP to SAP, vice versa, those kinds of scenarios. We will also cover integrations, hybrid changes where SAP and non-SAP systems are involved as part of the scope. So for example, we're dealing with a local application of the company, third-party software, and there has to be some sort of integration or communication between SAP and that software. You'll also expect a bit of insight into creating fully customized and start from scratch programs, requirements. This is coming from my experience as an in-house consultant and a consultant for an IT company. So I've gone through different companies and have dealt with numerous functional specifications template and projects, and so this is going to be my one-stop shop for the FS guide. Basically, I want you guys to see the whole picture when you're writing the functional specifications document, and I will be focusing on guiding you, not just giving you a blank template with the headers as I shared a while ago. So if you're interested in that, please check out the link in the description box. This is coming soon. I'm just trying to free up some time to edit the videos and map it out in the learning management system. Okay, so finally we're at this point. We can finally get started with the 10 must-know tips. Number 1 would be to know your Wricef. First of all, you need to know your Wricef. This is an acronym that is pretty standard across SAP changes or projects. It basically helps you categorize SAP specific requirements or changes. So moving on to the next slide, you'll see that it's also known as Wricef-W and Wricef-A. And I did mention that Wricef is there to help categorize the change or the requirement. You can make use of Wricef to categorize each requirement or change as needed, and this helps add this development perspective, easier perspective to the developer. What is Wricef? So basically it stands for workflow, reports, interfaces, conversions, enhancements, and forms. Some of you may be asking, okay, what is Wricef-W? It's the same thing. You just put the W at the end of the description. For Wricef-A, again, it's the same description. What we're missing at this point is the A portion, and the A here stands for authorizations. Now for me, I personally like to leave that part out and just stick to Wricef. So personally, I prefer to include the authorizations as part of the additional details and considerations section in my FS document. This time we're going to go through each of the categories and try to understand their differences. First off, we have W for workflow. Flow, simply think of approval flow logic and a sequence of approvals. For example, you're an employee and you want to post a document in SAP. Before it is fully posted, let's say that you need to get it approved by person 1. Once person 1 approves it, it goes to manager 1. After manager 1 approves it, it goes to manager 2. And once all of the necessary approvals are done, that's the time the document will be posted. So this time we're talking about this sequence of tasks that are being passed from one person to another. So that is an example of a workflow. For reports, this is pretty straightforward. Think of SAP reports. May it be custom, standard. If you're utilizing Report Painter or BW reporting, anything report related, that would fall under reports. Next up, we have I for interfaces, and you can simply think of this as integrations and communication with third-party software. Now, it's not limited to just that. We're talking about SAP to SAP or SAP to non-SAP communications, vice versa. So at this point, we're trying to communicate with different systems, and we can even communicate with another SAP system. So these are just some examples that fall under interfaces. For example, when we say BAPI, IDOC, EDI, REST, API, SFTP, these are just some examples that involve communication with one system to another. I will leave a link down below if you're interested to know the difference of these acronyms. Next up, we have C for conversions. And at this point, I want you to simply think of converting data from one format to another or one system to another. So one good example is to consider the scenario where you have an old system with legacy data and you need to transfer the old data going to the new or 2B system. So in this case, two of the key acronyms in SAP would be BDC, which stands for Batch Data Communication, and LSMW, which stands for Legacy System Migration Workbench. So anything that involves converting data from one format to another or moving the data migration from a legacy system to the newer system, we're talking about conversions. Next up, we have E for enhancements. Just think of adding, modifying existing functionality to standard SAP. You can even think of user exits, customer exits, business add-in or body, and a new program. So all of those would fall under enhancements. Last but not the least, we have F for forms. And you can simply think of this as printouts and custom forms. Examples would be SAP script form, SAP script print program, smart forms. One good example would be payment advice. So if the client wants to change the standard SAP form for the payment advice, then that type of change would fall under forms. We're done with the Wricef, and this time we're going to go to tip number 2. Tip number 2 is the developer or reader doesn't want to read a novel. Have you ever been tasked to read a document with so many pages, mostly consisting of huge, endless paragraphs? I want you guys to add on that scenario and say that you need to read the whole document by tomorrow. This is me exaggerating, but who knows, it may happen. So in this case, the reader must be able to understand the information in the fastest way possible. That being said, I would suggest that you make use of pictures or visual aids, diagrams, visual cues, your choice. Avoid making huge, compact paragraphs. This is an example. So you'll see that there's a paragraph on sample text 1, and we see another version in sample text 2. So which would you prefer? Would you prefer the compact version, or is it easier to digest the less compact version, which is sample text 2? My preference would be sample text 2. It makes it easy on the eyes and easy to digest the information. The third tip would be the developer or reader doesn't want to read a vague document. Are you familiar with the stories where the information changes as it passes through different people? This is actually a good analogy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this image, but this is a famous analogy. We're talking about different interpretations of the same requirement and how it happened. This is actually funny to me and saddening at the same time because it's true. This sort of thing happens all the time where the information or understanding varies per person. So that being said, if we were to go back to writing our functional specifications document, I would suggest that you be as detailed and descriptive as possible. Next tip would be to write to convey a message, not to show how proficient you are in complex language. I have tried reading technical documents and it takes more effort and time to understand the information. And it will take way more effort and time before you reach a good understanding of what the technical document is saying. I want to say that please don't make it difficult for the reader to understand the document. The goal is to ensure the developer, the reader, can quickly understand the message you are trying to convey. So you need to be able to find that sweet spot or the middle ground where your words are easy to understand. I'm not saying that you completely avoid using technical terms. Sometimes it cannot be avoided. And so the alternative would be to explain the technical concept or behavior in layman's terms. Or if you prefer to explain it in a technical manner, then please at least add some images of some sort. One good scenario that I want to share is we can think of an IT support as well. If something goes wrong with the custom program after a couple of months or years, This IT support person may need to refer to your FS document, and let's say that he or she needs to resolve the issue as soon as possible. This time we're going to think of the IT support finding your FS document and discovering how technical it is written to understand the content. Tip number 5, think big. Think of the big picture. So a functional specification document doesn't have to be limited to the sections defined in your template. You can add more information as you see fit. If you feel that you need to consider aspects of the project or change, then by all means include it. The more detailed you can be to get to help the reader to understand what's going on, the better. And this also doesn't apply to the reader but to you as a consultant. So in my case, I have dealt with different projects involving integration, non-SAP applications, programs created from scratch. What does this mean? It means I need to consider a lot of things than the usual SAP changes. So I may need to think about audit compliance, external databases, the server, so on and so forth. And those examples are just some of what I consider. Over the years, I have kept track of all of those additional aspects or considerations, and I did include them in my personal checklist as guidance. So this in turn, it helps me see the big picture. And at this point, it's not just about creating this change, it's also about seeing the impacts and potential concerns after the change is implemented. Tip number 6 would be cautious. What you put in the functional specification document matters. It is one of the documents that is constantly being referred to in case there are system functionalities in doubt. So it really helps to be cautious in what you write. If you are unsure of something, make sure it is verified and approved. Make sure that the content is verified, aligned with the business champion or stakeholder. And it also helps to question what you write. There is no harm in challenging or questioning some behaviors. It may be a potential consideration that helps avoid future issues or mishaps. Tip number 7 would be the functional specifications differ. So there is no standardized format for functional specifications. It differs from company to company. It also differs if you're an in-house consultant, a consultant under an IT consulting firm, a freelancer contract-based consultant, or some would call it self-employed. And of course, it would differ if you're working with an agile approach or other methodologies. So when it comes to agile, in this case, if you're dealing with a pure agile project, you will not be creating functional specifications, you will be creating user stories, product backlogs, so on and so forth. And because all of these formats and templates and these differences, I have decided to create my own template, combining the sections so I'm reminded of certain considerations. And I basically use the templates that are given to me by the company, and I have my own guide. So what I do is I use my checklist, I use my template, and then I transfer to the company template. For tip number 8, keep the details concise. So you want to avoid confusing the reader. This also considers the wordings that you use and even the ordering of requirements. An example would be if you mention the word app or application in the background and purpose section of the FS, and then you mention portal in the requirements section, it will cause confusion even if you're talking about the same thing. So even though app and portal is the same in your perspective, your reader is not necessarily going to understand that it is the same thing. For tip number 9, don't cram several requirements into one. So which would you prefer? Several requirements jammed into one requirement item, or several mini requirements itemized and sorted accordingly? So it depends on how you would like to discuss the requirements, but I prefer to spread them out, break them out into mini requirements, and then arrange them well. So in my perspective, it is easier to digest and understand what needs to be done. And towards the end, you can explain how each of those requirements would work together. This also helps allow the reader to see the whole picture. Last but not least, never ever forget about the end user. So at the end of the day, the end users or the stakeholders are the main priority. You need to make sure that you get the requirements, functionalities right. You need to deliver according to their expectations, and at least manage those expectations if there are technical or system limitations. So I did emphasize the manage expectations accordingly. No system is going to be perfect, and 110% according to the expectations of the stakeholders. So in this case, you need to be able to manage their expectations, keep it on a realistic level. Don't promise something that is not technically feasible, something like that. And you know what? You can follow all the tips above from 1 to 9 and write a concise, detailed document, but if the content does not meet the expectations of the stakeholder, or worse, it doesn't solve the main problem, that would of course be a bad outcome. So with that, I suggest that you exert time and effort to understand what the client is trying to solve, rather than just blindly agreeing to the request that the client is giving you or asking of you. Okay, that's it. We've gone through the 10 must-know tips in writing SAP Functional Specification documents. I hope this helps you. I wish you good luck. Again, if you're interested in the FS course that I have coming soon, please don't forget to visit the link down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.